Remember when we couldn't buy cooked chicken or alcohol or cigarettes? When we couldn't even go for a walk in the park or a swim in the sea? In the early days of 2020, when news of a deadly new coronavirus emerged, the world began to consider how to control it. Keeping people at home became an inevitability. But it was, of course, uncharted territory for everyone. Understandably, mistakes were made. But how were those decisions arrived at, especially the ones that even at the time of national concern didn't quite make sense? Well, now we have a chance to find out. Business Forum Sakeliga has obtained a court order against Cooperative Governance Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma to release lockdown records. And I'm joined now by Piet, the CEO of Sakeliga. Mr. Roux, thank you so much for joining us. You know, we are so glad to see the back of those lockdown restrictions. Why was it important for Sakeliga to access the decision-making process around those decisions?
Well, we filed the original proceedings for this information in December of 2020. And by then it was clear that was supposedly going to be a short-term intervention to flatten the curve was actually becoming a systemic fly-by-night operation by governments all over the world. And instead of applying caution in the degree to which they interfere in people's daily lives and the operation of this life support system we call the economy, it was clear that they were taking drastic measures. And we were prohibited from going to beaches, buying flip-flops and all of that. We don't need to remind ourselves. But by the end of December, by December 2020, it was clear that this was not going away. And we decided to start filing promotion of information requests. And that's that information. Then 2 years later now, we obtained with a court order. And Dr. Dlamini Zuma is forced to hand this over to us, even though she wished to keep it secret. But we filed it because it was clear that there was a systemic problem with the way governments approach this crisis, and we cannot afford a repeat.
So all the way through the lockdown, you know, we were aware that we were in uncharted territory. We were also told that a lot of these decisions are science-based to the best of our knowledge. So I think when the first lockdown happened, we were certainly told if we hunker down now, we might miss the worst of it. The reality, of course, is that there's large sections of our population that were unable to social distance, that didn't have homes. But at the time, there was a hope that we could get there. So it's, you know, hindsight is 20/20 vision. There was a hope that it would at least buy us some time. There were also all those fears around, we didn't know what people who were HIV positive would do if they got coronavirus. We were worried that we would see many, many more people die. Is your need, what do you want to see in the, if the decisions make sense according to the science, would that appease you somewhat? Is that what you're looking for?
Look, it's okay to make mistakes in uncharted waters, but it's not okay to keep making mistakes for 2 years on end, cost 2 million people their lives. And I mean, even, you know, in the beginning it was 3 weeks and then it became 2 years. That's not a small mistake. That's not something that we can just let pass. We need to examine what went wrong. We need to make sure that it doesn't happen again. We cannot afford in this country to cost this many people their jobs, their livelihoods, and we cannot afford such interventions. It's bizarre to think that for 2 years, frequently we could order people in the different living conditions you have in South Africa, ranging from shacks for many, many millions of people, ordering them to stay inside their buildings and not only walk around between 6 and 7 or whatever it was. So it's not a small mistake. We face possibly the worst economic intervention, costing people their livelihoods, their health, their ability to sustain their families, their dignity. We repeatedly keep making mistakes for 2 years. And with we, I mean the government. And it's okay. We grant them leeway, but it's not okay to do it for 2 years the way it has been done. So what we hope to achieve with this records, remember, we started this process already in December of 2020, is to get the information that was supposedly so science-based and evaluate what was indeed the factual basis for the regulations. Was it worth it? And if not, then let's learn some lessons from it, and let's keep some people accountable for making these mistakes. And if they were reckless in their behavior, maybe they shouldn't be making decisions again of this magnitude in future.
There were quite a few people on the National Coronavirus Command Council, not just cabinet ministers, but also scientists, business people. And we got a sense that there was a collective decision-making process. Are you concerned that perhaps the minister because I think ultimately it was her decision to make because she was the one who had to enact the regulations. Are you concerned that she's overstepped in some way potentially?
Look, we are certain that they overstepped. We made several court cases, not only this one during lockdown. We prevented through court cases Minister Ibrahim Patel from instituting a form of business licensing through the CIPC. The Minister of Small Business were also prevented through our court cases from instituting business licensing early in 2020. By 2022, earlier this year, actually some of our court cases contributed to the lifting of the state of disaster ultimately, and the prevention of turning this temporary state of disaster into permanent health regulations. So it's not as if this is only Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's fault. This was a collective error in the political leadership in this country, and including that of Mr. President Cyril Ramaphosa. While Dr. Dlamini Zuma was indeed responsible in a statutory way for the promulgation of the regulations, she's part of a government that accepted those decisions, and she could have been replaced if Mr. Ramaphosa was not satisfied with her decision-making. So I think it's not only her fault. She bears a lot of responsibility, but certainly it's unacceptable behavior and also illegal behavior in our opinion, and that's why we won several court cases, and several others are still ongoing on the side of not only Dr. Dlamini Zuma, but other people in government. And yes, it's true that many people agreed with government, but also that was a selection bias. Government tended to select the people to advise them who they thought would advise them in the way they wanted to operate. There was a groupthink. And I think, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and even today, we have the opportunity to start reflect on 2 years of very bad public policy making and realize that there was a big element of groupthink, not only by Dr. Dlamini Zuma, but also by the people who advised her to look at some elements in isolation and forget that it's not only forget, but to disregard the impact of what their supposed lockdown means for the future of everybody in this country. I think we must do some self-reflection, and I hope that this records will help with that process. We're not done with reflecting on what went wrong in policy making the past 2 years.
Thank you so much for chatting to us, and I look forward to hearing from you after the 9th of December when you have access to those decisions and how they were made. That was Piet, the CEO of Sakeliga. They're going to get access to those records, and I think he makes such an important point. Of course mistakes were made, but let's look back and reflect on what lessons can we learn. But let's just lighten up the mood a little bit. There were some very unusual restrictions. There were some strange decisions that were made. Let us play for you Max Hurrell, who remixed a lot of the statements that came from government during lockdown. This particular song had all of us giggling. Take a listen.
Cigarettes, tobacco products, and related, that we should not open up the sale of products. And the reason are health related.
But also when people swallow, they put saliva on the paper and then they share that soul. It means they are also sharing. If when people swallow, they put saliva on the paper and then they share that soul.
Yeah, what a crazy time. But you know what I love about South Africa? Through it all, we were able to laugh, and we've got through it. But certainly a time for reflection and perhaps learning lessons as well. Let's deal with this matter now. And